Well, thank you very much, and it's very exciting to be here at DLD, and I just want to talk very briefly about the book to elaborate on some of Marcel's points, and then invite the panel up to have a discussion. This title, Philanthrocapitalism, is obviously a merging together of the words philanthropy and capitalism. A bit of a mouthful to say, which I've found a lot as I've been trying to talk about the book. How do you say the word is the first thing that everyone asks me. But the idea came out of my reporting at The Economist during the dot-com, first wave of dot-com innovation at the end of the 1990s, where I would go around and find that many of the people who were making money and doing some of the great innovative things in that period were also people who had a very strong social conscience. They wanted to give back to society. They wanted to really make a difference in their, through their actions, both in work and outside of work. And they wanted to apply their business insights and creativity to solving some of society's great problems. I discovered there was this phenomena called sudden wealth syndrome, which some California psychiatrists thought up as a name to describe this phenomena by which people would suddenly get very rich and be thrown into a search for meaning in their life. And that was one of the forces that was going on. But as I talked to more and more of these leading business people and philanthropists, many of whom are reported in the book, I found that actually there is a coming together, I think, of social concern and business. That it used to be the case that we would see business over here and solving society's big problems over there. And now the leading business people want to solve society's problems. They want to bring a business-like creativity to solving society's problems. And increasingly people are seeing that in business itself, business needs to engage with society and with doing good. Otherwise, business will not be as successful as it might be. And I would argue that some of the latest crisis that we're going through at the moment was the result of people taking their eye away from the needs of society and focusing too short-term on how they could make money however it came, rather than really asking deep questions. And I hope that one of the ways that capitalism will come out of its current problems is by engaging more fundamentally with society and the needs of society. Now, that's a subject we're going to come on and talk about with a really excellent panel that we have now, and I'm going to invite the panelists to come up on stage. We have, first of all, Abby Disney, who is a member of the Disney family, and please, yeah, big round of applause. Secondly, we have
Sorry.
Edwin Moses, who I think I remember most as a child. Well, not as a child, growing up anyway. Don't want to age you that much. But he was my definition of winning. And every time he used to race, the question would be, would it be a world record, not whether you would win. And it's great to actually meet a hero like that in person. And then Arend Oetker, who probably needs no introduction, but is one of the great German business families and a great philanthropist. And finally, Sean Parker, who is one of the founders of Napster and now the man behind Facebook Causes, which is now the #1 application on Facebook. Now, to kick us off, I'm just going to show a very brief trailer for Abby's new movie, because as well as doing a variety of interesting philanthropy through giving in New York and sitting on some other philanthropic boards, she's a filmmaker, and this amazing movie that she's produced is just coming out and being screened this week in Davos, and here's a trailer for it.
Money, greed, ethnicity,
absolute power.
There is nothing that should make people do what they did to the children of Liberia. warlords gave these boys guns and sent them off.
They just do anything because they had guns.
You go to bed saying, God, please. What do we do? I had a dream, and it was like a crazy dream. We decided to protest. We wore the white, saying to people we were out for peace. Thousands of women, Muslim and Christian, were coming together, calling for peace. These women had seen the worst, but they still had that vibrance for life. And we said, well, if I should get killed, just remember me that I was fighting for peace. We stepped out first and did the unimaginable. To send out a signal to the world that we, the Liberian women, we are tired of the killing of our people. We can do it again if we want to.
I want to hear now, gratefully acknowledge the powerful voice of women.
We're also on Facebook.
And we'll come back to talk about that aspect of the communication, mass communication aspect of social change a bit later in the discussion. But what we're going to be exploring here is really how we can use this engagement of business and business people to really change the way society addresses some of its most pressing problems, whether it be issues of poverty or political strife and violence, to climate change. And to kick us off, we're going to start with Edwin Moses, who is now head of an extraordinary foundation that is trying to drive social change through sport, but is working very closely with business. And could you talk a bit about what you do and how it works?
Well, I'm the chairman of an organization called the Laureus World Sports Academy, which is made up of 45 people, much like myself. We have some of the icons in the world of sport, and we cover the range of sports. Just as an example of the type of individual that we have, Boris Becker is vice president of the organization and dedicates a lot of time. We use sports as a tool for social change. We don't build infrastructure and we don't do coaching, but rather we build and develop awareness for all types of situations that young people find themselves involved in. We've been involved in projects, landmine clearing up in Cambodia in the Khmer Rouge region, to kids that live in South Africa that are basically living on the streets. We've dealt with kids in New York City and Berlin, and we have 8 national foundations around the world, in South America, South Africa, in Spain, France, and Italy, here in Germany. And we use our icons to generate publicity and awareness for social ills that are occurring all around the world. That's one part of our organization. The other part would be the World Sports Awards. We honor sportsmen from around the world every year. We have a world-class sports awards program that has been moving around the world. We started in Monte Carlo, and then we moved for 2 years to Portugal, and then we moved for the next 2 years with the help and aid of the King of Spain to Barcelona. Last year we were in St. Petersburg, where President Vladimir Putin was our guest of honor, and this year we're going to have our World Sports Awards in Cape Town. We have fantastic sponsors: Mercedes-Benz, the former chairman of Mercedes-Benz, and the chairman of the Richemont Company, Johann Rupert, Richemont being the firm that a lot of you probably have some of their products, have used them all the time. Cartier, Mont Blanc, Alfred Dunhill, Panerai Watches, IWC, and they've are the patrons of the organization, and they gave us our seed money to really start. So If we have a problem in South America and people love football in South America, we'll send our soccer players. In places like the team that went to Indonesia after the earthquake, we sent cricketers down there because we have five of the best cricket players of the century. We send them on missions to deal with kids and to deal with those particular situations. So our diversity in sports, along with the diversity of our sponsors and the willingness of the 46 or 48 Academy members are all-stars. We're able to send, we have the power of 48 people who feel the same way and have the same passion, and we use those 48 people as our icons to develop awareness to these situations. Fantastic organization.
Excellent. Aaron Dodka, would you just talk a bit about your philanthropy and what you do?
Basically, as an entrepreneur, I think philanthropy is not as important as having people employed. My biggest, strongest belief is this is the best way of philanthropy to keep as many people employed in work, especially in these times, I think, where unemployment is the cause of unrest and maybe of dangers, and I think the employment as such, I think, is the most important. So I invest in my companies, and I feel that's one part of my philanthropic kind of behavior. But in addition, of course, the money I can spend is competing with the philanthropic in the sense you really mean, and I do it mainly for cultural projects, for educational, and for climate change. But I'm also organizing others and help to get enthusiastic of like you do on just to share this kind of, not to do it myself. I only invest if I can share with others, whether it's a state, and I also have some public-private philanthropic kinds of organizations. I like this, to have partners who really accelerate and have a bigger impact on what comes out. So when I turn 70 soon, I have 10 projects, different ones, and I do it together with other people, organizations, to really, for me, I like it. So certainly it's a pleasure also. It's not only a moral duty, it's joy. It's full of joy and gives me satisfaction of why I live. So I think I benefit from others, and I like to give what I can.
Great. Abby, I'm going to switch to you next. Just briefly tell the audience about what your philanthropic activities are and passions.
I'm going to answer this really briefly in the hopes of getting more time later.
Yes.
My foundation, the Daphne Foundation, my husband and I started to do ongoing general operating support funding for low-income communities and organizations that work with low-income families in New York City. We started in New York City because that's where we live, and we believe that as a good neighbor, you work first in your own backyard, you find your way around your own backyard, and then you go out into the world and you try to do more. We do ongoing general operating support because general operating support is something that a lot of foundations don't like to fund precisely because it is not measurable. And we're hopefully going to get back to this question of measurability and impact and what that really means and why it matters. And we want to fund in a way that supports the individual people who do the work, because at the end of the day, they're the only asset in the NGO sector. We've expanded out now into West Africa since I've done my work in Liberia, and we're starting a project now to build a self-sustaining, not-for-profit business that will sell solar panels in Liberia through microloans to women who can then sell the power to their neighbors out in villages.
Thank you. And then lastly, Sean, just tell us a bit about how Facebook causes came around and...
Sure. So I was actually at Facebook as one of the founding president of Facebook, and helped run the company for the first 2 years. And while I was there, we noticed that there was a lot of grassroots activism that was starting to occur on Facebook. People were self-organizing into groups. A lot of it was around international disasters. Some of it was around causes that people were passionate about. But most of this was, there wasn't really a path to action. There wasn't a way to leverage that activity to raise money. So when or get anything measurable done in the world, kind of back to this theme of measurability, which is so important in all the work that we do. So when I left the company to move on to what I thought was going to be my career in venture capital, I sort of kept looking back at what was happening on Facebook, and so much of it was alluding to the visions that early internet pioneers had had for the internet and the democratizing potential of the internet, the power of the internet as an organizing tool. So much of that potential hadn't really hadn't borne fruit yet. There had been a lot of talk and sort of very little actual sort of realization of that potential. So, as we kind of looked at Facebook, it occurred to me that, all of this could use a little bit of a push, and that we could probably, myself and my partner, could probably apply some of the same viral strategies that we'd used to grow Facebook and that I'd used to grow a prior company called Plaxo to activism. And so we launched this product about 2 years ago called Causes on Facebook. The basic thesis was that activism, philanthropy, fundraising are all highly social activities. And they're activities that didn't really happen on the internet until the internet became truly social and also mainstream. Once those two prerequisites were met, you could start to see mainstream activism and large-scale decentralized fundraising and all these things that we'd always dreamed would happen on the internet and hadn't really happened yet. 2008, I think, was the year that all those things really happened. So we launched this application. The thesis was these things are social, and if we apply the right viral thinking to it, we ought to be able to put these tools into the hands of the average Facebook user, give them the ability to start a cause, invite their friends, incentivize those people to invite their friends, create a social environment where people will want to donate and raise money. And so in the last 2 years, I think we've proved that basic thesis has worked out quite well. We've grown it to about 40 million Facebook users, 22 million of whom come back every month and make use of the service. And I think we've raised somewhere in the order of around $6 million in the last year, and that's ramping pretty quickly.
Great. Well, now you've got a sense of where each of our panelists is coming from. We're going to get into the discussion. And one of the, I think, the central themes that I found as I was writing my book was that what's going on today seems to be about a coming together of the head and the heart, that traditionally a lot of philanthropy was about doing things that felt good, but didn't necessarily engage the part of you that was about making money and using your creativity and really delivering results. And there's a whole vocabulary that the new philanthropists are using that catches this sense of coming together of head and heart, which is words like venture philanthropy or social investing or even philanthropy for celebrity philanthropists or philanthropreneurship, a whole load of words and concepts like triple bottom line, double bottom line, blended value to try and measure in new ways. But ultimately, I think it comes down to impact, a desire to show impact and to know that you're being effective when you're doing this work of philanthropy. And I want to ask each of our panelists what for them impact and effectiveness means and how they reassure themselves or show or demonstrate that they are being effective and impactful in their philanthropy. And I'm going to start with you again, Edwin.
Well, my organization 2 years ago, we did a research project because everyone understands that people love sports and sports is good for kids, but no one really had any concrete evidence. So we commissioned a research team from a university in England who went out and visited about 20 of our projects all over the world, looked at how we did our media, looked at what our mission was, what we said we were going to do, and how and analyzed how we went about it. And we got back concrete results that actually showed that what we set out to do, we were able to do it, and we're doing it in good form. In addition to that, we set up best practices. We found that if there was a project, we had a very good project in Sao Paulo, Brazil, for example, that we wanted to be able to duplicate, maybe not using the same sport, which happened to be boxing, but we wanted to be able to transfer the knowledge and experiences of our projects, of one of our projects, to be able to duplicate it in a different part of the world with different people. My organization, we started out with 6 projects in 4 different countries, and now we have about 63 projects in, I think, 32 different countries. So we're a true global organization. And through our head office, we manage the operations, we manage our output. We're able to help projects where in certain parts of the world they have no infrastructure.
Do you have a particular set of goals that you say we want to affect this many lives, or drive this particular set of social changes that you're measuring against?
We look for a situation that needs to be addressed. We have to have a sports component to really lure the kids, lure our clients, we call them our clients, lure them to the table so that the community-based organizations can actually deal with them, do what they do best. We don't recreate the wheel. We don't start projects ourselves. We find people who are good at what they do, and we fund them. And we're able to monitor them, help them build infrastructure, help them build office, develop people in the office, and we have seminars where we exchange information all the time. So we try to create a situation where we fund for a minimum of 3 years and make sure that that project is going to be sustainable, whether or not we continue to fund, and we can assist them in learning how to receive funds and learning how to generate funds from other sources, publicity, marketing, and so forth.
Now, Abby, I'm going to come to you next. I know you have a sort of slightly more nuanced view of where business and philanthropy can come together.
Pathologically nuanced.
Yes.
That's how I think of myself. I don't know, I get kind of cranky about the word impact because, I was funding for a few years, and then in the mid to late 90s, we had this influx of very young people who were, as you said, looking for meaning and so forth. And they really did bring this eager idea about measuring and impact and the rest of it. And it was incredibly healthy and good for the sector because it was an incredibly inefficient sector. As you can see from what Chris was talking about in terms of logistics, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There was so much inefficiency in the sector. It was all heart and no head. But I think what happened was we saw the pendulum swing all the way over to the head. And we saw this mania for measurement and this mania for impacts and outcomes and on and on and on at the expense of the things that we know in our hearts to be true. So we don't measure anything at the Daphne Foundation. We're not well resourced enough to do that. It would be a colossal waste of our very limited resources. There are other people who can measure things, and with our common sense and our hearts and our instincts, we can extrapolate perfectly fine from what they're doing about whether or not we're having an impact. I'd rather spend my money on programs, and especially on things like general operating support, to go back to that for a second. Can
you just explain what that is? Because, I mean, this is, I think, a very, very important point, because
general operating support funding is the money that you write a check to the organization, and then they just go and do what they need to do with it. And it might buy a file cabinet, or it might pay a director's salary. It might be discretionary funding for emergencies, or even a cash pad for an organization just in case they have a cash flow problem. It's very dissatisfying to a lot of these new philanthropists because it can't be measured. It precisely can't be measured, and it can't be controlled. So the mania for measurement, the mania for impact, the mania and the idea that the philanthropist should always control what happens to the dollars once they get to the organization is incredibly unhealthy. And I mean that there is a collective effect of all of these individual foundations, each making an individual decision about whether or not to make general operating support. Because what they're essentially saying is, I expect you to have a file cabinet, I expect you to keep responsible books, I expect you to pay everybody's health care and pay your executive director's salary, but you're not going to do it with my money, you're going to do it with somebody else's. And if everybody chooses to make that decision, just the same as if everybody went to the Coliseum and took one stone home with them because that one stone didn't make a difference, makes an enormous difference. What it creates is a sector that is disabled, that is chronically underfunded, that chronically has maybe 70% of what it needs to function, that pays its employees in a way that very often they're only one paycheck away from being their own clients half the time. And it sets them up in this hamster wheel of fundraising. They're competitive with each other in a sector where competition really shouldn't be a problem or an issue. It balkanizes them. It makes them competitive about my issue of homelessness is more important than your issue of hunger. And it just sets up an incredibly, frankly, stupid dynamic in the entire sector. So it seems to me logical to understand that, say, if 18 to 25% of an organization's funding annually has to go to things like file cabinets and unclogging toilets and making sure there are no rats in your offices, then I should expect that 18 to 25% of my grant should go to those things and then measure the rest of the program funding. The fixes for this are very simple. And I think that the place where we see this best illustrated is in disaster funding. I was on the September 11th Fund Board, and I watched $525 million come in without anyone lifting a finger or asking for the money. And, you know, our constituency was essentially the American public. So we did, you know, public opinion polling, and we said to people, what is our, our recipient? Who do you want this money to go to? And there were very loud elements, a lot of them very conservative, saying all that money should be divided up 3,000 ways and just given to the families of the people who are the surviving members of the families. Other people said, look, there are these concentric circles moving outward from the World Trade Center. There are the survivors. There are the people who were injured. There were people who lost their jobs. There were people who lost their jobs in a secondary way. And there were people who were victims of, say, anti-Arab and anti-Muslim violence. All of these could arguably be the people who would be recipients of the money. In the general public, there was a very low tolerance for anything that moved outside of the first two concentric circles away from the World Trade Center. And the dirty little secret that we all knew that we could never say out loud was, we have too much money and too little need. If you could just simply let me expand the definition, for instance, north of Canal Street, you know, the police ran a police line down the center of Canal Street, so if you had an odd number address, you didn't get money, but if you had an even number address, you did. If you could just it was so arbitrary. If you could simply say, include all of Chinatown rather than the half that was south of Canal Street. If you could include the people who not only lost their jobs at National, but all the people who were dry cleaners and the businesses that in neighborhoods. So what happened was that people gave very emotional money. They gave it very quickly, and they wanted results very quickly. And what they didn't understand was that this wasn't about what they needed to happen for themselves emotionally. It was what people needed that had nothing to do with their emotional needs. And so when Katrina happened, you know, we turned around and we did the same thing. We came up with lots and lots of money. It all got stuck at the Red Cross. The Red Cross couldn't distribute it quickly. And what's so interesting is Katrina is really a story of a lack of general operating support. At a taxation and spending level, at the government level, if they had spent on levies the equivalent of general operating support at a civic level, if they had spent on capacity, for instance, in buses to get people out of those neighborhoods, if foundations had funded general operating support to the civic organizations and the advocacy organizations and the neighborhood organizations that could have helped to organize those people to get out, there would have been an entirely different situation. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about things like general operating support money that cannot be measured.
I think it's a very important point I was finding as I talked to a lot of, well, I found that this was the single biggest complaint that non-profits had was, just fund us as organizations, back us as organizations. And I think the best venture philanthropists are really bringing that mentality. They're saying you wouldn't start a company, a startup in Silicon Valley, and be saying, oh, you can't spend any money on hiring people and paying them a decent salary, and you can't invest in the infrastructure of the company.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, one very briefly.
Just say, I think we become, as foundation people, very confused about who's doing the work. And there's a very big difference between writing a check and running a program. And I think we need not conflate these things. There are people who know much more than we do, who are in neighborhoods, who are doing the work, and we need to trust them with their skill sets and their knowledge base.
Now, Sean.
So I think you're hitting on a very important point, which is this balance between kind of people's emotional desire to get involved in philanthropy and the hard work that needs to get done in order to affect change. and this is something that we've had to really struggle with at Causes, because part of what makes what we're doing so exciting is that it's about systemic change. We're trying to make fundraising more efficient. We're trying to, put tools in the hands of individual people so that they can build awareness around causes they care about. This is a long-term sort of systemic vision, but it's very emotionally unrewarding in a sense. We don't have that direct emotional connection to the work that the organization is trying to do. So we've had to learn a lot of discipline when it comes to operating this little tiny company. The platform has been tremendously successful in terms of numbers, but and that's set the expectations extremely high.
Can you just give us the numbers, actually?
So it's about 40 million people who are actually running causes. 22 million people use it every month. There's about 300,000, maybe 400,000 people who've actually set up causes. About 1 million people join a cause on Facebook every single day. We just launched a feature called Petitions a couple weeks ago, which lets nonprofits set up a petition to collect signatures around a specific issue. And that feature's already collected around 1 million signatures in something like 3 or 4 weeks. So the ability to mobilize people using these social platforms has turned out to work pretty well. But the long-term vision of how we support the nonprofit industry, because everything we do is in service to our 4,000 nonprofit partners. We don't get that direct feedback from the field, and yet we have to go on sort of raising money, go on building features, putting these tools in the hands of our nonprofit partners and in the hands of the users of Facebook so that they can make a difference, in the hope of making the whole system more efficient long-term.
Great. Arend Odke, I mean, one of the points you made in your introduction was that you see the real impact that you have through creating jobs. And I think that's a very interesting point, and a lot of philanthropists, I think, are now looking at how do they create organizations that do stimulate a lot of employment. But how do you look at your giving? Do you look at that purely in terms of the joy that it gives you, or do you actually start to ask questions about what difference is this really making to the people who are receiving the money or the benefit of it?
When you started your presentation, you were talking about head and heart, and I didn't read the book yet, but I dipped in it, and I thought what could be instrumental in combining these two, the business world with the emotional, with the heart world, and that's are there contradictions? Are there contradictional procedures? How can you combine the good things of the heart method and the brain method? And I think there are a few things I would like to mention. First, peer-to-peer exchange, peer-to-peer review as an instrument. That is some quality assurance, some comparison as a method. So I head up an organization which you could translate in Germany as the Association for supporting the science and the humanities. So there are 3,000 business people from Germany. It's an almost 90 years old organization. We administer also 430 foundations. What we do is we have a system of competitions which we look for, and also for the humanitarian projects, and we try to have interchange. That means that the founders meet to each other. They have platforms where they talk to each other, exchange the method, and they are very eager to do that, because sometimes they're very individual persons. They don't have, either they are widows, they didn't have the training on business, so you have to have some kind of tools how to enhance out of the business world this to get a quicker input, and also I think to engage the governments, because it's still small money compared to what the government is going to do for education and social assurance and so on. So, but we could be quicker, and we should generate some movement and push it and find ways and means how the government is going to interfere with more money than with the foundation can do. So I think the basic idea of your book is welcomed, and I look forward to dig deeper into it and on the methods of really getting efficiency on all levels. And one issue is transparency, of course. If the tsunami has been mentioned so often, we collected so much, millions, tens of millions, I don't know how much, more than 100 millions. But there were some doubts. Is that's far away, far away, and less transparent, therefore. And who's to channel that? The big organizations, people have doubts that the Red Cross or, the big organization, even from the churches, that the final benefit is really efficient enough. So the better you have the transparency, the more it's a mixture of trust and control. So trust is one element. Yes, the family is a good unit. You can trust the family. But the organizations, the bigger they are, the intransparent they are, there is a distrust to them.
It's interesting. I think as a business journalist, one of the most striking things coming to this sector is how less transparent philanthropy is than the business world, which was really amazing to me.
There's no corporate governance as for us companies, for these big organizations. Where is the control system of? It's intransparent, yes, for themselves, but it's not to the extent we might need it.
But we still, as foundation professionals, expect total transparencies from our grantees. We don't hold ourselves to the same standards in terms of transparency that we ask of our own grantees. So there's where there's money on one side and need on the other, there's a power imbalance, and we've unfortunately not held ourselves accountable to our own misbehavior relative to that power balance. We haven't enough gone to the sector and said to you, what do you need? Instead of having a meeting in an office in New York and deciding what the need was and then going out there and asserting it. It comes down to, you're not going to have a clear sense of where all your money goes. And there will be leakage in one way or another. And it might be in the form of having to pay some guy off to get your shipment into Indonesia after the tsunami. And I'm not sure if penny for penny you're losing more money in that form of leakage than you would lose in, for instance, paying an inflated salary to a US person to go to Indonesia to make sure it gets there. I think leakage is leakage, and I don't care if it goes in the form of a bribe or a big salary, frankly. And I think that the answers, generally speaking, the best, come from the local people. And that those people in Indonesia, in Banda Aceh, could have had a lot to say about a better way to get that stuff out, but we never asked. Because our fingers are very fat. The more money you have, the harder it is to move efficiently. And so we need to get our fat fingers wrapped around people with skinnier fingers, and those people have skinnier fingers, and those people have skinnier fingers, and those are the people who are going to be local, who really understand the nuances and the nooks and crannies of the place where the money is needed.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, Edwin, I mean, one of the interesting and fun chapters to write in the book was this on the subject of philanthropy, celebrity philanthropy, and that wasn't just because I got to hang out with Angelina Jolie. It was actually kind of the really interesting way that celebrities now understand how they can use their brand, and how businesses are now much better at partnering with celebrities to really mobilize the masses in pursuit of a particular cause. Now, you've worked with a number of big companies. Can you just talk a bit about how that relationship works, and how the brand of the celebrity and the brand of companies come together to actually do some good?
Well, I think first thing I'll do is I'll let the audience know the type of some of our membership, some of the people that we deal with that are members of the Laureus World Sports Academy, and they represent athletes who everyone knows, and they've made their celebrity in sport, but also some of the best business minds within the world of sport, commentators. For example, Seb Coe, who's the chairman of the London Olympic Organizing Committee, is one of our members, as well as a woman by the name of, from Morocco, Nawal El Moutawakil, who was on the IOC commission that's going to decide where the Olympic Games are in 2016, and her committee made a decision in 2012. We've got people who do commentary all over the world, from soccer and tennis. Boris Becker and John McEnroe and Martina Navratilova all commentate on tennis. But with our power of the 50 Academy members that we have, what we do is that we're able to multiply the effect, our celebrity effect, and work together. And we're not just celebrities by name. During the course of the year, we put in about 300 member Academy days on the road, traveling to places like Indonesia or the Ivory Coast, where
but
we
I mean,
sent
you were telling me you work with Mercedes and you've
Yes.
worked with Vodafone. I mean, what have they been bringing to your cause, and what have you been bringing to their activities?
Well, the brands are exclusive brands. The Academy are exclusive members. One of the, I would say that from a organizational point of view, we have the benefit of the marketing people at Mercedes-Benz, the marketing people at Richemont, who help us do a lot, from publications to media, and getting what we do, our mission, out in the public. Mercedes-Benz and Richemont deal with very high-level people all the time with their products. And Mercedes-Benz, for example, here in Germany, runs a German foundation and makes sure that the projects are viable and that they get done. So it's a very good synergy that we have. And we found actually 4 good companies, not only Mercedes-Benz and the Richemont Group, IWC Watches, Vodafone is one of our major sponsors, and we all work together well. It's a great relationship, mainly because the Academy are on the ground and working, and it works for everyone.
Now, Abby, I wanted to come to you because part of one of the trends that's very strong out there is the use of advocacy and communication through movies. I mean, Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth, I guess, was funded by the Skoll Foundation, or Jeff Skoll's for-profit business, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you see philanthropists using mass media in that way?
Yeah, I've always seen myself more as an activist with a checkbook than a philanthropist, and I've always wanted more to make change than to make things nice. And so you start to ask yourself a lot of questions about where does change genuinely come from and what can make the biggest difference. The film that we made, Pray the Devil Back to Hell, is the story of a group of Liberian women that protested nonviolently, and it's a longer story than I can give you, but basically helped bring peace and helped monitor peace and helped organize an election in that country. It was not known anywhere. And what's very interesting about the process of making this film was that we could go to stringers and people from the news organizations and find mountains of footage of men shooting at each other and boys with guns and horrible, hideous things and women bleeding on the side of the road and the rest of it. What we couldn't find was footage of the women protesting for peace. Now, when I first heard the story, I heard it from a British guy who had been at the talks, and he said to me, I'm one of the guys who was climbing out the window. When they surrounded the building, the men climbed out the window. The warlords, tough guys. He said, and then there's CNN footage of me climbing out the window, and my producer's instinct was, oh great, archival footage. So we went to CNN and we searched and searched and searched. We searched BBC, we searched Sky News, Ghana TV was there. There was nothing, nothing. They were there, the leader of the women had gone to them and said, we're gonna have an action here, please stay, we want you to record this. Nothing, not a foot. Every piece of footage we had of women protesting for peace, women threatening to strip naked, women on sex strikes, women spending 3 years outdoors fasting and praying for peace. The only footage we could get of that was private footage from people who happened to be there with video cameras. And the most dramatic moment, the confrontation at the peace talks, was in a VHS tape that was holding up a window in a windowsill and getting rained on. Like 10 feet is what we have that's left that wasn't damaged from that. So that tells you something about the way we understand news, the way we understand who matters at the peace talks, the way we understand change and the democratic process. This explains so much, but also, this also makes the reality for the next time. this happens. Because all of these guys who were not shooting because they were just regular guys. They have all the same prejudices any one of us has. So they generate the next generation of prejudice by not being able to imagine the importance and the value of these women simply because they weren't members of the political class. They didn't dress, look, act, behave in any way like members of the political class. So first of all, their invisibility from a news perspective was going to setting up this situation where here these women had done this heroic, major thing, Martin Luther King kind of thing. And they were going to be forgotten, not only forgotten, but erased from the record. So that the next time something like this happened, somebody would say, oh, gee, isn't it interesting that that happened? Well, I can tell you a story in Chechnya, and I can tell you a story in Chile, and Argentina, and Peru, and Cambodia, and I can tell you all these stories, and they have all been erased just in the same way. And it seemed possible to pull this one back from the edge and to prevent its erasure from happening. But above that, to then take these women and make them visible to other people around the world and unlock what happens when we become visible to each other. Because we're all here because we know, like, the good guys outnumber the bad guys. They just do. It doesn't take a lot of bad guys to screw it up for all of us. But if we're not visible to each other, and that was what was so great about being at the inauguration the other day, was the way we all became visible to each other after 8 years of thinking maybe we were crazy. It was an extraordinary thing, and it unlocks this amazing thing. So I've taken the film, it's played in Peru and Cambodia and Iraq and Afghanistan. I took it to Sudan, where women sat after this and wrote a position statement. This is Arab and Southern Sudanese women together wrote a position statement, and they're now working to get 1 million Sudanese women to sign this position statement demanding peace in Darfur now. And in Zimbabwe, we showed it to the women. They're meeting in Botswana right now as we speak. 20 different organizations that have each been working separately from each other are for the first time having a meeting to talk about how to bring their efforts together on a single thing. So I think that visibility creates change. Visibility is in and of itself a revolutionary act. And if you could get it made with high enough production values, if you can get it seen, which is the trick, and if anybody's in Davos, please come. But if you can, then these are big ifs. These are hard with documentaries. Not everybody can be Al Gore. It can make massive, incredible change.
Well, you mentioned this, the inauguration and the extraordinary campaign that was run by the Obama team, particularly involved a lot of social media. And I'm very hopeful that we'll see a lot of the lessons learned from that campaign applied in the field of philanthropy. And yours is one of the examples, Sean. I mean, can you talk a bit about where you see this going in terms of how social media can really build on what you're doing and go much further over the next few years?
Yeah, well, I want to sort of groove off something you were saying about making these things visible. Visibility is an important part of it, but then you have to ask this question about, well, how do you, once it's visible, how do you aggregate power? Yeah. How do you get a base of people together, and how do you give that base of people the power to affect some kind of change? And in a democracy, we understand how that works fairly well. Outside of that context, it's not necessarily as clear. So one of the things we hope is possible through causes is that we're going to give people the tools to band together and aggregate some form of power so that they can have a voice in the process, whether that's in terms of raising large amounts of money or in terms of aggregating votes around an issue that people care about. So, to your question about what's the future of this, causes on Facebook is not actually just about raising money. And it's not just about building big causes with millions of people in it, or even collecting a lot of signatures. Ultimately, it's about interfacing with the electoral process, allowing large groups of people to band together around issues they care about and have a voice in the democratic process. Now, this is actually not that different from what special interest groups and political action committees do. Only it's very, very expensive for them to do it. And if you look at the example of the NRA is a single issue lobby. Their budget is, I think, over $100 million a year. And that money goes towards mobilizing a base of I think it's like single-digit millions of people who will turn out,
I've got a plan.
who will turn out every single year reliably to vote on this, pro-gun issue. Now, that's an enormous amount of money that's being spent to mobilize what is sort of on like, internet scale, a fairly small number of people. Our hope is that we can take those same tools, which are now really, really expensive, that political action committees have in terms of managing their mailing lists and getting people out to the polls reliably around a certain issue, and put those same tools into the hands of pretty much everybody. And if we're able to do that, we can take money out of the process, and I think that's a big part of the dream.
Can I just say one more thing?
Well,
Last tiny?
very, very quickly, yeah.
It's a media conference, so I feel like I have to say this. The problem is that democracy is always vulnerable to demagoguery. And what we saw in the 80s and 90s was this massive vertical integration of media where all these different aspects of media just sort of gathered and bundled into single. And so you have something like GE that owns NBC, that owns, and on like this. And that enhances the power of demagogues and destroys the power of the people at the bottom of the pyramid. And that's what's so hopeful about the open source media and the Web 2.0 and all of these things, the blogosphere. That's what's so hopeful about causes on Facebook, because it really does counteract the effect of the vertical integration of media.
It's interesting. I mean, I interviewed Bill Gates last week because he's now publishing this letter annually to explain how his foundation is doing and what its strategies are. And the interview's on philanthrocapitalism.net, which is my website. But it's basically well worth listening because he really talks about the need for even someone like him to actually ultimately get governments around the world to support the strategies of global health that he's pursuing. And that ultimately requires citizens to buy into what he's doing. And so I do think there is this move towards much greater accountability that's going on.
This is a very interesting point that you're raising, because there's what's happened up until the rise of social media and like the Obama campaign has been so top-down. It's all been mass media-driven, vertically integrated. And what you're seeing now is the development of these bottom-up platforms for affecting social change. They haven't met yet. They're not integrated. And so a million people can organize into a cause on Facebook and raise significant amount of money and generate a significant amount of awareness and result in hundreds of thousands of volunteers, and the media doesn't write about it. It's not on the radar screen of the mass media. So part of that is that we're not doing a good job at causes of interfacing with the mass media and getting those success stories out there. And part of it is just it's so early in the development of these technologies. I mean, the first big example of this that we've seen that's crossed over, I think, has been the decentralized or very bottom-up fundraising that Obama was able to. That really was a big factor in Obama's success.
Now, I think we're unfortunately nearing the end of our time. I'm whizzing by. In a moment, I'm going to ask each of you maybe to throw out one challenge where you think there's a great opportunity for this audience to actually make a difference, which you've noticed and don't have time to do yourself, but if you had a bit more time, this is where you would be focusing. But I just want to quickly touch on the economic situation, because it seems to me, I talked about sudden wealth syndrome. We've now got sudden no wealth syndrome. And how's that affecting each of your organizations? And is it, well, let's start with you again, Edward.
And what was the question again?
How's the economy going wrong in such a crisis? I mean, is it affecting you at all?
We were actually pretty lucky in that we just signed a major sponsor last year, which is Vodafone, before all of this started. So that really helped us out for the next 3 or 4 years.
And you're confident they're not going to abandon those commitments?
No, we've had no abandonment. In fact, I think that all of our sponsors are finding ways to deliver what we need in a lot more efficient way and a lot more succinct way. So we've been very, very lucky. Just before we end, I just wanted to say one thing that Aaron mentioned earlier about what is important to him. And I think Abigail will agree with this, that we can raise all the money we want and deploy all the money we want and start as many programs as we want. But in the places that we go and the things that we see, the thing that really matters, and he hit it right on the head, is jobs. Jobs and education. Those are the two things that if you're able to put down an infrastructure that is sustainable, then at the end of the day, that's going to do more to help the situation than just pouring money, throwing money at a problem. And you know, my hat is off for that thought, because we need more people to think like that. That he didn't come here and say, I'm interested in building wealth for my shareholders. His interest is making jobs available for people so that they can help themselves. And that's what true philanthropy is about.
Basically, foundations are built as organizations to live forever, for eternity. But if you have 40% of your fortune in shares, and they fell, as you know, 40%, then the foundation has a problem. And if you have, as you have now, interest rates below 3%, because of the crisis, because the money had to go, the interest rate had to go down, then the foundations are affected. More in the United States, much more than in Germany, but also in Germany. We are much more state-financed, and there are other systems, but there is, yes, you can transfer that into the future. That's what the American foundations try to do. It will never happen in Germany. Can't be possible. You cannot build foundations on credits. No one would buy that. Yeah. But that's a method of, of mentality. But basically, I think, yes, there will be some impact. So
you don't think the wealthy should be? I mean, this is a time when they should be digging deeper rather than
yes, we
looking after
even more. We have to acquire others, to build up more forces and do more for motivation in these crisis systems. Crises are also opportunities.
Sure. I mean, you might want to briefly mention, I mean, you're a for-profit company, which I guess changes your...
We are, and so I mean, there's two lenses through which you can look at what we're doing. I mean, our social mission comes first and foremost for us, and the fact that we're structured as a for-profit company has more to do with the nuances and vagaries of the law surrounding being fundraising for nonprofits, and how you interface with the political process, and Federal Election Commission regulations and so forth. It's easier to operate as a for-profit entity than a nonprofit. But in terms of our ability to raise funds, we're everything, because we're a growth business and we're technology. We just keep turning the crank and we keep growing, and we're so early in that life cycle that we're not big enough to where the macro picture really affects us. Everything that we do is growth, so we're somewhat insulated from that macro. The macro picture really affects you when you have a big, huge ship that you are piloting, and it takes a long time to turn that ship in a new direction. And in the meantime, if things are collapsing, you're losing revenue streams, or all of your existing revenue streams are shrinking, so you really feel it. But growth is actually, it's a fun place to be, whether it's early stage venture capital or an upstart nonprofit, because that big picture, you don't have a big force of people that you need to support. I mean, we're 12 people at Causes. We're a tiny little organization. Our burn rate is about $150,000 a month. So everything we do to move the needle, we're okay. And then on the for-profit side of it, it's sort of the same story. I mean, we make money as a company and sustain our operation through our media platform. And we basically help connect businesses with nonprofits, and with a base of users on Facebook who care. It's essentially cause-related marketing, which is still a growth sector in the advertising world. So we're able to sustain ourselves, and we're able to keep growing with every new deal that we sign. We don't have an existing portfolio of deals that we're worried about collapsing.
Right. Abigail.
For me, I'm. Whenever this happened during the internet bubble, what I see is all my grantees just suffer. because they have the retrenchment in foundations, the money disappears, they recoil, and after Bernard Madoff, I know 3 different foundations that closed their doors just immediately. It's a horrible situation. The people who suffer, obviously, are the people, the clients of the grantees. I believe firmly that at this point, as philanthropists, all of us, we give away the froth off the top of our cappuccino. Let's face it. I mean, if it really is a question between a gold plate for the toilet seat in your private jet, you know, or another grant, very often it's the gold-plated toilet seat. So I think that we all need to challenge ourselves right now. This is crunch time here. People really need us. We need to ask ourselves, is there one thing I could give up? You know, because it's the right thing to do, because people need me. I think we all need to, right now, right here, ask ourselves, what am I willing to do without?
Yes.
And so, in terms of a challenge,
yeah, I'd just end with this, each of you with your challenge.
I think that the issue for the 24th, I'm ahead of my time, 21st century is small arms. Small arms kill more people than malaria and TB together. The 5 permanent members of the Security Council, of which Germany is one, of which the United States is one, are the 5 largest traffickers in small arms. The United States killed a lot of progress that was happening 8 years ago when John Bolton came in, that people had made toward real significant change in the way small arms are monitored around the world, in part because the NRA has observer status at the United Nations. John Bolton himself said it was his proudest accomplishment to stop all conversation about small arms. There is nothing meaningful happening about small arms, and we all, and this is why we need a strong, vigorous civil society. We need to fund advocacy. We need people who are not beholden to governments and not beholden to corporations to have really loud voices, and that hold both corporations, big multinational corporations like GE, and governments like Germany and the United States accountable for the lives being lost every day because of our trafficking in small arms.
Sean, what's the one thing that you would be doing if you weren't doing causes that would really make a difference, that you would challenge this audience with?
Oh, so, I mean, I'm always taking the kind of big picture system-wide view, in part because of what I'm doing with causes, which is purely about trying to make the system more efficient and empower everybody. And that often is a little bit demoralizing in a way, because I have 4,000 nonprofit partners, and they all have these incredibly urgent, real, palpable needs. And it's like, how do you allocate your resources and your time when you have so many good causes that are all, trying to use your platform more successfully to raise money or organize or whatever it is they're trying to do? And it can sometimes be a little bit overwhelming, and you can kind of sort of, it forces you to sort of emotionally shut down a little bit, because you're so aware of the magnitude of the problem. And I think that this is kind of, there's an analog here in terms of what everybody goes through with giving and philanthropy and service. I think everybody really wants to try to make a difference, but if you're willing to kind of let the pain and suffering that the world is going through in, it can be completely overwhelming. And so you have to choose something specific and pursue it. And I think what happens to a lot of people is that, and I've definitely experienced this, with causes and some of the other philanthropic work that I've tried to do. You start to sort of let it in, and it all becomes kind of overwhelming, and you feel like you can't do anything about the problems because they're too numerous or they're too big, and so you kind of sort of shut it down and put it away. So I think if there's one specific thing that everybody could try to do, it's to sort of maintain that openness and the compassion without letting that kind of without letting the dam burst and letting the magnitude of the problem overwhelm you.
Okay, thank you. Aaron.
My last word is that I'm an entrepreneur. That was my first word. So I was thinking about a concept in these crisis times where many people around the world will have less money. My main business is baby food. So I try to have some eco-concept and price point concepts for lower income people to get our baby milk infant nutrition in the crisis, to find ways and means that the babies can first be served in spite of the crisis. So again, I think as an entrepreneur in what kind of offers we can do professionally. It's a mixture. Yes. So to make philanthropy and capitalism jointly and jointly approach, and that's what I'm looking for. Next, if this is successful this year in Turkey and Egypt, for example, where I try that, I will expand that kind of idea.
So you challenge people here to do that in their own businesses, to find low-cost ways.
Yeah.
And lastly, a challenge from you to this audience.
I think that if I had to put forth a personal challenge, I think it's time for...
Can you hear? Can we have the mic on, please? There's a hand mic here if you want to use that. Thanks.
If I would have to make a challenge, I think that the time has come again for people all around the world, including the United Nations or the Organization of African States, to really do something and hold people accountable for situations in which innocent people are starved out, innocent people are killed, for example, with small arms, mines, things of that nature. I think it's about time for humanitarians and people who really care to hold people accountable for what's going on in the world, whether it's what happened in Cambodia 30, 40 years ago, to Serbia and Bosnia, Zimbabwe, Sudan, wherever these things occur. I think we as human beings have to demand organizations who claim to be able to have some influence in that area to do something, because too many people go without water, too many people get hacked up and shot, and there's too much genocide in this world. And I think until people begin to stand up and challenge someone to get in there and do something and not let millions of people die for political expediency, that for me would be a challenge, I think, that would really make a difference for the next 50 years.
Well, that's certainly a big thought, and I think to rediscover that idealism that created the United Nations, would be a great challenge for us at this time. So I'd like to thank the panel for a really inspiring discussion.
Good afternoon. Thank you. We started with a wonderful film, your trailer. Yeah. Let us also end with a film we shouldn't miss, which is explaining the Laureus Foundation. And could we have that now?
Sport has the power to change the world. It has the power to inspire. It has the power to unite people in a way that little else does. It speaks to youth in a language they understand. Sport can create hope where once there was only despair. It is more powerful than governments in breaking down racial barriers.
Вручение премии Laureus World Sports Awards – это яркое и значительное событие в мире спорта.
It's a dream come true, of course, to receive this award. I've received many over the years, but this one is the one.
Michael Schumacher. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Italy men's football team.
Sergio Garcia.
Justin Hannon.
Ronaldo.
Franz Beckenbauer. Right here.
Yelena Isinbayeva.
I'm so happy. I don't know what to say more, but it's really cool. Thanks.
If we can make it reality, this is reality. Thanks a lot.
We have
the sort of Oscar for movie stars, and this seems to be the Oscars for sportsmen.
Rafael Nadal.
I think tonight, for me, this is the Everest. Thank you.
Lance Armstrong. Manchester United football team. Tiger Woods.
And thank you for the prize.
The South African rugby team.
Lewis Hamilton.
I was always one that wanted to come here and meet the stars, and I feel a bit overwhelmed to be surrounded by such legends.
Johan Cruyff.
Let's hope we can do something to make it a better world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Friends of DLD, that was the first day of DLD. The first half day, we thank you all for being with us. And we're really looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Heiko, we have 2 programs tomorrow. One for the early starters.
We have 2 sessions tomorrow. We start at 8 a.m. with a great social networking experience, which is going to be happening live and presented by Jeff Pulver. So if you can, be here early at 8 a.m. It's going to be fun, lots of pencils and physical work involved. And then we start at 9 with 2 parallel sessions. And everyone have a good night. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing you tomorrow. And sleep a little bit, because tomorrow is our party and you won't sleep.